Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. We've seen multiple movies about dinosaurs, but let me ask you a simple question. Which, according to you, is the biggest and most iconic of Godzilla's rivals? I bet you never gave it a thought. But let's not worry about it, because we're here to discuss these rivals and their rivalry. When we talk about rivals in particular, there are a few names that come to mind, like Mechagodzilla, Destoroyah, or likely King Ghidorah. But there's one more, and I can guarantee that no one thought of the villain from the 1999 film Godzilla 2000 Millennium. In this movie, Toho introduced a villain by the end of it, but we all forgot about it as it barely appeared. Only in the climax. The villain didn't appear in many franchises and also had no particular name. It just got up, fought Godzilla, and then disappeared. Many questions pop up in our minds about this villain. Who or what is it? Where did it come from? And does it really exist or not? We get these answers about this creature in the History of Kaiju. In it, it's shown that the creature is something very similar to aliens. This alien-like creature has the ability to grow stronger by merging with the DNA of Godzilla. I know it sounds a bit odd, but yes, that's the truth. But did you know that this merger ends up as a mistake for the creature? The DNA somehow fights back with the Orga itself. We're going to break down what Orga really was, how it worked, and why its plan ended in disaster. If we look closely, it would be an understatement to say that Orga's story is not tragic. He tried to evolve his own growth, but it turned against him in ways he couldn't imagine. Let's join this surprisingly disturbing biology of Orga. Who and what was the Millennium before it became Orga? We know that Orga eventually becomes a biological disaster, which he didn't expect. Let's go all the way back to the beginning where it all started. Before becoming Orga, this alien-like creature was much like a very different life form known as Millennium. He wasn't the giant monster that he eventually grew into. As we dig deep, we find in the movie that the Millennium appeared on Earth 60 million years ago. It happened during the Cretaceous period. This is where things begin to get weird. It was not flesh and blood like a human, animal, or most film monsters. Rather, it was an advanced alien life being that consisted largely of consciousness and energy. Indeed, the Millennium was more of a collective mind than a single organism. It could reside in and operate a physical body instead of being a body. And here's one of the funniest, most intriguing parts of the film. Did you notice that big metallic UFO that we see in the movie? Well, the UFO isn't just a normal spaceship. It is mentally linked to the Millennium and functions almost like an extension of its will. This amazing energy life form came to Earth 60 million years ago, but things didn't turn out as it had hoped, not even close. It somehow crashed into the Pacific Ocean and was buried deep under the ocean floor. Gradually, sediment was deposited layer by layer in this spot. It was isolated from its energy supply, without which it could not live. No light, no way out, nothing. And so, the Millennium was forced into a kind of deep sleep. So there was no death this time. The living creature was still alive. It was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And it waited for 60 million years. Seriously, pause and reflect on that number. 60 million years. Dinosaurs roamed the Earth when the Millennium first came. The extinction event was yet to occur. All of the major evolutions in mammals followed thereafter. The earliest human ancestors, the evolution of modern man, and ultimately, all history. All this was happening while this thing was at the very bottom of the ocean. It's really hard to comprehend. While we're used to considering ancient creatures as old, the Millennium has other rules. When humans arrived, it was already stuck under the ocean for a longer period of time than one could possibly imagine. At the time, the entire species had passed by, and it was still there, waiting for the next one. Is the Millennium one organism or many, and what happened to its mind? But this brings up a rather disturbing query. What about the hive mind within the Millennium when it began to transform into Orga? Well, it's a pretty unsettling answer that the movie provides. The Millennium was extremely smart before the change. It was patient, careful, and always thinking several steps ahead as the UFO. It observed Godzilla at a distance, collected information, and had a definite strategy. However, when Orga Orga appears, that intelligence gets lost. Orga, normally calm and calculating, becomes aggressive, reckless, and desperate. It ceases to behave like an advanced alien and begins to behave more like a confused animal struggling to survive. That's why Orga is so sad. Godzilla's DNA didn't just transform his body either. It damages the mind, controlling it as well. In the transformation, the hive consciousness might have been split or even partly destroyed. Indeed, Orga may not have had a clear idea of what the Millennium was aiming for to begin with. It's the product of a disastrous plan. The body survived, but the mind that gave it life did not. How did the Millennium wake up, and why target Godzilla's DNA? So after 60 million years of doing nothing, what wakes up the Millennium? Well, surprisingly, the answer is us. Fast forward to 1999. Human technology had advanced to the point where it was producing huge amounts of electromagnetic activity. That was enough energy to reach the dormant Millennium buried under the Pacific Ocean, according to the film. More specifically, in the film, the Millennium is awakened after a crisis control intelligence research submarine shines powerful lights on the fossilized UFO deep in the Japan Trench. Once reactivated, the ship later replenishes itself with solar energy, which explains why light and energy are so important to the aliens' return. They unwittingly awoke an alien life form that had been dormant for millions of years. When it had sufficient energy, the Millennium rose and came out of the depths of the ocean. But the first thing it did was not attack a city or start blowing things up. Rather, it began to collect data. It's the Millennium thing to do. Before it acts, it learns. Its primary target, of course, was the database of the Godzilla Prediction Network. It accessed those records and found itself with a treasure trove of information on Godzilla, from his biology, his behavior, his energy output, even his cells. So, as soon as the Millennium awoke, it started to learn about the most powerful creature on Earth. As we'll discover, that was a pivotal choice. This is the time things began to go wrong. As the Millennium funneled through the information, it had stumbled onto a piece that it had never expected to find, the Organizer G1. This is the protein that allows Godzilla to heal from wounds. This is the protein that gives Godzilla his remarkable healing power. It's simply the very reason he can heal from damage that would kill nearly every other creature. I mean, if you were in Millennium's place, then that discovery's probably a miracle. Think about it. It was a life form that had been in stasis for 60 million years in a broken body. When it heard about a biological system that constantly self-repaired and regenerated, that solution was easy to come up with. So why not try it for yourself? The plan was a no-brainer to the Millennium, to take the DNA from Godzilla and revive it with the DNA from Organizer G1. So that's exactly what it decided to do. The big thing is that this was no random monster. The Millennium was using its sense of logic. It had discovered the mightiest of the living things on Earth and realized that it could upgrade itself. Truly, it wasn't the plan that was poor. The problem was that Godzilla's DNA wasn't a piece of meat that you could simply drop in and have it work. That little part is what caused the Millennium's great idea to be a complete disaster. What is Organizer G1, and why was it impossible to absorb? For that, we need to take a close look at Organizer G1. It's the protein in Godzilla's genome that makes him so incredibly regenerative. That's how he's able to recover from injuries that should kill him. No, the film doesn't treat it like magic. It's introduced as a real biomechanical compound acting on the cellular level. It heals broken tissue, regenerates bone, and restores organs faster than anything in this world. However, the Millennium was not aware that the Organizer G1 isn't a harmless protein that quietly enters a new body and begins to repair things. That's not even aggressive enough. As soon as it gets into a foreign biological system, it begins to take over. It doesn't adapt to the new host, but instead starts manipulating the host to conform. One cell at a time, it expands Godzilla's blueprint outwards, forcing everything around it to bend to Godzilla's will. By this, I mean that Organizer G1 isn't cooperative, it basically dominates. And that was the Millennium's biggest mistake. It believed that it could take Godzilla's DNA into itself and remain in control. But the cells of Godzilla had other plans. The Millennium believed that it was soaking in a helpful trait, but in fact, it was bringing one of the most virulent bioentities on Earth into its system. And after that process began, it was impossible to halt it. The Millennium was soon caught in a battle that it could not possibly win. It was just that the energy-based biology wasn't equipped to deal with the stuff of Godzilla. Rather than absorb and control it, the opposite took place. The cells of Godzilla began to invade. What was supposed to be a smooth transition turned into a biological disaster. As Godzilla's genetic code took effect, the original structure of the Millennium started to decay. A part of it wished to stay the same, but another part was being pushed to become a little more like Godzilla, and those two systems just weren't compatible. Orga was the product. Unfortunately, the upgrade to Orga wasn't a success. It was, by no means, the same old Millennium. It was a cipher, a being that's trapped between two definitions of life and can't be part of either. Orga, in a sense, was not the next man, the next animal. It was the actual failure of an experiment. There was a battlefield, and both sides lost. What does Orga's external biology tell us about the failed transformation? Honestly, just look at it if you want to know what went wrong with Orga's body. No need for an X-ray or scientific report. Its skin is the best ambassador. At first glance, Orga has this strange purple-gray appearance, but it's the texture that's really unsettling. Its body doesn't look complete, it looks unfinished. It has odd bulges, odd proportions, and odd shapes throughout the body. There's a lack of symmetry and completeness. That's where it differs from others. This isn't battle damage, it isn't an infection or some alien disease, it's what can be seen and is a product of two different biological systems competing over the same body. That's what's going on. And Orga's skin, when compared to other kaiju, well, there's a huge difference. Even the most bizarre and fear-inducing of Godzilla's monsters seem organically sound. They have a consistent body design. They are as fully grown as they're supposed to be. Orga doesn't. There's no resting place for him. Its body never matured. Rather, it was stuck between what the Millennium was and what the DNA of Godzilla intended it to be. Each of Orga's odd shapes, bumps, and distortions on its body is a reminder of that ill-fated transformation. Its whole presentation is a sort of snapshot of an unfinished biological process. What do each of Orga's physical features reveal? Orga's body gives us a lot of clues as to what has gone wrong, as he's stuck between two different forms of life. Actually, all of its body parts would likely all point back to the same issue: Godzilla's DNA forced into a body that wasn't designed to hold it. Shall we cut to the chase? There's his size and the way he moves. Orga is about 60 meters tall, but it doesn't walk like Godzilla. Rather, it walks on its front legs, more like a large gorilla. You'll often see it supporting much of its weight on its knuckles. Now the fun part. The Millennium doesn't have a natural evolutionary trait, as it has nothing to do with Earth's primates. What probably did happen is a lot simpler. During the metamorphosis, Orga's body became too large, too quick. The bones and muscles were unable to cope with the rapid weight gain. Consequently, it had to stand rather stooped and used its long arms for extra support. It means that it walks that way because there's no other way for the body to walk. Then there's Orga's most recognizable characteristic, its big hump on the right shoulder. It's simply a blob of meat at first. However, if we consider it in the context of transformation, it becomes a lot clearer. A lot of fans thought that this was supposed to look like one of Godzilla's dorsal plates. The building was being constructed with Godzilla's DNA, but the process was incomplete. Instead of a complete dorsal plate, Orga was born with a large and uneven growth on one side of its body. Frankly, each time we see that shoulder hump, we're probably witnessing the physical effects of the transformation that is not happening as we watch. Not to mention the mouth. Orga's jaw is way too big even for a kaiju. It may open up much more than it should, and eventually it may grow to a size where it attempts to swallow Godzilla whole. But this doesn't seem like a natural feeding adaptation. It seems it's more of an unfortunate side effect of its body taking over during the transformation. Its face started to stretch and grow, making its mouth bigger than the Millennium ever dreamed of having. As we'll see later, that's the last desperate bid to win the battle that Orga makes with its oversized jaw. What can Orga actually do despite being broken? But you know, after all this stuff, Orga is quite lethal. He was still able to retain some of Godzilla's powers even after the transformation failed. It has a powerful energy beam that can fire from its shoulder, but it's closer to the UFO's plasma-style weapon than Godzilla's atomic breath. It also acquired some regenerative powers. Not as powerful as Godzilla's, but it can heal much quicker than the Millennium ever could. Not only that, but it appears to have some of the Millennium's weird teleportation powers and has the brute force to physically knock Godzilla back. So there was at least a partial transfer of the DNA, but all this power is contained in a body that's unstable and is slowly falling apart. Why did Orga try to swallow Godzilla whole? Now we come to the weirdest part of the whole film. When the fight draws to a close, Orga suddenly grows its jaw to enormous proportions and begins to eat Godzilla whole. Initially, it seems like sheer folly. Biologically, however, it makes sense. At this stage, Orga's DNA absorption had come to a halt. It wasn't fully changed, its body was on shaky ground, and it was still falling apart. Simply coming into contact with Godzilla wasn't enough anymore. So Orga would have to find a way to absorb all of Godzilla. It was a simple idea. If it could get Godzilla into its body, the DNA transfer could be completed. It thought that this could help to develop and balance its decaying shape. It was a gamble, but from Orga's point of view, it was the best bet. But Godzilla had other plans. Godzilla was charging his nuclear energy, and as Orga brought him inside, Godzilla released his nuclear energy from inside Orga. The blast ripped the alien apart from the inside, and it was completely destroyed. And that's the tragedy of Orga. It waited 60 million years to gain Godzilla's power and risked its life for it, but was finally killed by the power it had tried to absorb. Why is Orga named after the protein that destroyed him? But once everything had come to an end, there was one more thing about Orga's story that made it even sadder: its name. Ever thought what Orga actually means? Well, it comes from the same protein that formed it, Organizer G1, the same protein that the Millennium attempted to devour. It's the same protein that led to the transformation going out of control. It took 60 million years for the Millennium to find what it believed to be the key to survival. Rather, Organizer G1 annihilated its old organism and trapped it in a new one that was broken, and eventually caused its demise, which is the reason why Orga is a tragic creature. It's not really a Millennium anymore, but it never became the perfect being it wanted to be either. Ultimately, the name itself is a reminder of its lack of success. Whenever someone mentions the word Orga, they'll be unwittingly referring to what finally brought him down. What does Orga tell us about the limits of biological assimilation? In retrospect of Orga's story, it's not just a monster that appeared for a single movie, but also a character who continuously evolves and surprises us with fresh story ideas. In many respects, it's a cautionary tale. All of its life experiences have shown that there is some biology that's beyond his control. Godzilla's DNA was not the kind that could be taken up and harnessed as a tool. It was a power that conquered all that it could. The Millennium was neither reckless nor foolish. It was old, smart, and very flexible. It survived for millions of years, and when it saw Organizer G1, it made what seemed the most logical decision possible. But Godzilla's DNA would not cooperate. The Millennium grew weaker, even lost control of its own body, its own identity, and eventually its own life. The true tragedy of Orga. There was nothing wrong with his plan. He trusted in it, but it didn't work out. Lastly, Orga is named after Organizer G1, the one thing that made and broke him. But what do you think? Do you feel for the guy, or do you feel it deserves its punishment for attempting to alter DNA? Make sure to comment your thoughts below. If you liked this deep dive into one of the strangest creatures in the franchise, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.